Come back to Your List Sucks. Again, this is the worst thing ever. It's not like an automatic. But welcome back. This is Your List Sucks. This is going to be a very, very interesting list. This is not going to be a normal me trash and rip people apart. This is more of kind of like taking three people from like different walks of life, directors, and hearing about their list. This is the first time that all movies are separate. No one has anything overlapping, so it's kind of really an interesting list. And I'm kind of interested to pick the minds of each person on this list. So if you're looking at me to trash these guys, it's probably not going to happen. I think there's only a few ones that I can't stand, but we'll get to that when we do. First on the show, I kind of went to him first on this panel. I kind of asked him to help me pick the panel because I think it's an interesting concept, and I think he picked the right people, kind of. So Paul, best directors. You kind of also helped me sway this topic because I said best directors of all time, and then Paul is a elitist and picked all dead people.
Sure.
We wanted to do best ones still working, so we went that route. So how did you construct this list, and are you excited to talk about this?
Yeah, well, long-time listener, first-time caller for Your List Sucks. I'm excited to be on. But no, I ordered this. I definitely weighed it more heavily into how their recent work has been, I think, overall. But I tried to get a bunch of different mixes of different types of, filmmakers, different genres and whatnot. So it should be interesting. And yeah, I kind of like submitted these two as possible other panelists just because I think we all have very different tastes, and I think it could, develop itself into a very interesting list.
Yeah, again, there won't be much trash talk from my end because I'm an uncultured swine pretty much on this because there's a lot of ones that I'm like, what the hell? But I'm going to go to somebody that I'll probably relate to more on this list than anybody, Tim Brzakala. You're the everyman, the man that we needed on this panel because we're surrounded by some elitists.
Well,
you have some good choices.
I wouldn't... Yeah, okay. I mean, everybody thinks I'm all comic books and gumdrops, but I like some
these other two lists.
I'm sure they're worse. But I do like my elitist material from time to time. But yeah, no, this was a fun list to pick out because I like movies. So yeah, this was good to put together.
Some would say you love movies.
Some would say that. Some would say
how did you go about constructing your list this past week?
What I did was I just took all of my movies that I've ever given a 5 out of 5 to on Letterboxd, which is like 100 or so movies, and kind of narrowed it down there and was like, okay, let's look at the directors that I've actually given films like the best of the best to. And then when I kind of narrowed those few down, I started looking at just like combined works of like, okay, this director, they might not have a bunch of 5 out of 5s for me, but they've got like 10 4s or 3s, and that's like really strong. So I might have thrown them on there.
That's fair. And Nazario, you've been on the show before. How did you compile this list, and are you excited to talk about it?
I'm very excited, actually. And it was a hard process. Honestly, I had many different conflicting ideas how to go about it. But in the end, I just put every director I like in a pot and then started taking out the ones that have made movies that I consider not entirely successful. So I end up 9 bad movie from them. One that actually is more iffy, but he made it. He was good enough overall. And also the way I decided to pick the movies was a little different because since some of these directors are known, some are not, I wanted to pick a movie that I feel that is overall an excellent film and it represents what they usually bring to the table, but it's maybe not as well known as some of their other work. So people can look for them and maybe get more interested about it.
Yeah, awesome. Again, this is going to be a very interesting list. People have great choices. So basically, we're going to break it down by 3 kind of segments. It's going to be your 10, 9, 8 in a short, condensed chunk. Why they made your list, they barely made your list. They were just at the, they were at that bottom tier. Then we'll go 1 at a time through 7 through 4. And then we'll trade 1 apiece when we get to the top. We'll 3 through 3, 2 2 2, and 1 1. At the end, we'll talk about our honorable mentions, what missed out on people's list. Again, how the show works is These three come with a private list. No one knows what's on each other's list. And I do not compile a list myself, so the combined list is based on all three of these guys' choices. So we're going to start with Paul. Paul, give us your 10, 9, and 8, and explain to us why you picked these movies and why these directors made your list.
All right, yeah. So starting with my number 10, a choice that was actually in my original list before when we were doing the all-time list, and that's Werner Herzog. The movie is called Grizzly Man, and it's a 2006 documentary. I'll sort of get more into that in a little bit. So Werner Herzog, Grizzly Man is the first one.
Does anybody else have that one? No.
Werner Herzog? No. Got it. Uncultured again. My number 9 is going to be David Fincher, and the film is Zodiac.
Does anybody else have Fincher?
I think Tim is muted. So
yes, I have it higher. Yes.
That's considered a yikes, so we will talk about that later.
Yikes!
And then my number 8, I promise that neither of these guys will have it. The director's name is Hirokazu Koreeda. The film is called Afterlife from 1998. He also
joke's on you. It's on my. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So I'll kind of start getting into it now with my 10 and 8. So with 10, Werner Herzog, I picked someone who I think works in both documentary and fiction, and I think documentary is kind of an overlooked segment of directing, but I think that it's very important. And he's got a very distinct style, both sort of visually, but also the way he tells his narratives. He's got great movies ranging all the way back to the 70s, and he's still making great films today. But Grizzly Man is a super fascinating, it's kind of a documentary within a documentary. It's a film about this guy who is obsessed with living with bears in the wilderness, and he sort of films himself doing it. And it's sort of about his kind of insanity and how his life sort of changes very much when he goes and lives with them. So I'd highly recommend checking out Grizzly Man. Very interesting documentary. And then my number 8 pick, Koreeda, who directed Shoplifters last year, the Oscar-nominated foreign film. This film, Afterlife, is one of my favorite films of all time. It's a Japanese drama where basically when people die, they have films made about a moment in their lives, and the film follows the people who make these like short films that these people have to live on for eternity. It's a great concept, and he just brings great humanity, I think, to all of his movies. I think this is his most essentially human, because I think the moment people pick says so much about who they are as people. So I think I just love the way he represents humanity, and the way his filmmaking is just very touching, and it's an incredible filmmaker.
Yeah, can't consider this sucks on your list because I haven't seen either one. But I did look them up. I think Afterlife is a very, very interesting concept after watching the trailer. I didn't hear about it until this list, so that's kind of why I like this list already. It's getting me movies that I probably wouldn't have sought out and been able to see. So we're going to go to Tim. Tim, give us your 10, 9, 8.
Yeah, quick. I saw Shoplifters. Shoplifters was great, so I'm gonna watch that other movie now. So thanks, Paul.
It's very hard to find. Very hard to find, by the way.
I will try my darndest. All right, so my number 10 is probably on nobody's list because he's only made like 8 movies and only like 3 of them are good. But I picked up Peter Jackson with The Return of the King. I know. Nope, nobody. Okay. My number 9. What
was the movie, by the way?
Return of the King.
Okay, got it.
And I'll say why in a second. My number 9 is Nolan.
That's a yikes.
Okay. And then my number 8 is Ridley Scott.
Wait, what movie was from Nolan?
Oh, I'm sorry. Batman Begins. Batman Begins.
I mean, either way, if you have the director. So
yeah. So if you have Nolan, it just goes up.
Yeah. And then number 8 is Ridley Scott.
What movie?
Alien.
Okay.
Okay.
Nobody?
Okay. Nobody. So 2 of them you get to talk about.
Yeah, so my number 10, the reason I put Peter Jackson on there is because I think like the impact that trilogy had on me, that's kind of like, it wasn't like the moment I realized like, oh, like film can be this like amazing thing, but it was the movies that kind of made me realize like an epic scale, more of just like what I could see at home on TV, like going to see Lord of the Rings in the theater with my dad, like all 3 of them was just something that was like really special. And so like, and I don't think anybody else could have done it the way that he did because of his knowledge of the books and the source material and everything. So the Hobbit movies aren't great. Lovely Bones is actually pretty good. But King Kong is pretty meh too. So he doesn't have a great track record outside of the Lord of the Rings, but I think that those 3 movies alone say enough about him. Fellowship is actually my favorite of the 3, but I think he won Best Director for Return of the King. It's probably the most masterful out of the 3. It's the hardest one to juggle, so that's why I put that one. And then number 8, I put Ridley Scott. Because he hasn't made a ton of great movies recently, save for like The Martian, but like back in the day, he was like pumping out like hit after hit. And between Alien and Blade Runner alone, like which are 2 of like my favorite sci-fi movies of all time, I think he is just a master filmmaker. And the fact that he's like 84 years old or something like that, and he's still pumping out movie after movie, and just like you can still tell he just loves the craft and loves movies. Like it's just admiring. And Alien itself is just like, it is the best sci-fi horror. It's got everything rolled into one movie, and it's absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love it. Blade Runner is probably the movie I like more, but I think Alien is the more rewatchable movie, and it's the more digestible movie, and it's more fun, and I can like pop an Alien whenever I got to be in a mood for Blade Runner, so that's why I picked Alien.
Fair enough. Yeah. So I think Peter Jackson was an interesting call. Because I'm more of a defender of Hobbit than most people. But Battle of the Five Armies, after a rewatch recently, made me really just hate my life.
Yeah.
And I think like Mortal Engines doesn't help him at all. But at the end of
Well,
the day,
he didn't direct.
He didn't direct
he
just produced it.
That's my bad. Okay, sorry, they used him on all the marketing.
Yes, they did.
Good thing he stepped away from that. But still, to have your name attached to that doesn't help you. But I think Return of the King is a good one. I don't think I like Two Towers and Fellowship better than that one, but I get the Best Director. And then Alien, again, we kind of switched the topic late in the game after the list was kind of decided of best working today. No, that's fine. It is what it is. I think we shortened the field to make it more of a condensed list. But I think Alien's a correct choice. I think his. You didn't pick something like
The Counselor.
Yeah,
Whoa.
Exodus.
Whoa, Counselor, very underrated for the record.
It's fine, but it's not
Exodus,
that. It's not good.
Gods and Kings,
Good year.
Even The Martian, I think that would have been like Alien is one of those movies that I like. I actually like Aliens more than Alien. Like Alien more than Aliens.
Okay, I was gonna say, don't be that guy.
Which is like because it changes what it is and turns into like the super like over the top action thing where Alien was just a horror movie. So yeah, I like the choices on that one. I don't. Peter Jackson probably would have missed, but we'll talk about that later. Nazario, it's your turn. 10-9-8.
Okay, for my number 10, I picked a Spanish director that actually hit his stride in the 80s and 90s, a little bit on the early 2000s, but it's kind of forgotten by now. It's Pedro Almodóvar. He actually hit his stride around 2004 and 5, where Spain decided to stop nominating his movies for Best Oscar because every country only gets to nominate one because they thought he was famous enough. And the movie I picked from him is The Skin I Live In.
Anybody?
The Skin I Live In from 2011.
I was just asking if anybody else had it.
I've seen it, but it's not on the list.
Okay, for my number 9, I picked Darren Aronofsky. And it's just a kind of a director that hit me on my stride when I was a teenager. Well, late teenager, like 18, 19. And I actually started enjoying a lot of what he was bringing to the table. And the movie I picked is Requiem for a Dream. And for my number 8, I picked a director that actually has been solid from the beginning, a Mexican director, Alejandro González Iñárritu. He actually hit his stride in Hollywood late, but I'm picking one of his earlier work from his Death trilogy. I'm picking the middle one, 21 Grams.
Okay. So I don't think anybody else has those directors, so you get to go 10-9-8. Give us why.
Almodóvar is a person that was always very interested in identity, sexual identity, physical identity, and he deals with this in most of his movies. And the reason I picked The Skin I Live In is because it's a very quirky, weird, revenge-driven movie that kind of went on the radar because it was kind of insane, but at the same time very brilliant. And it's the first time I think he actually got the the ideas of sexual identity and physical identity and mixed them together and created this crazy little revenge tale with Antonio Banderas, which is overlooked and I think it should be watched by people. I picked Requiem for a Dream as Aronofsky's movie because even though I saw Pi first, this one hit me like a truck. I was about 19 years old when I first saw it, and it's a movie that shows the reality of addiction in its many different phases and different types of addiction. And the way the movie shot, the proof that Aronofsky was a visual stylist that could actually bring a lot to the table. And it was so real and so raw that actually scared me from trying drugs when I was in my 20s. So that's always a good thing. And Iñárritu, he came to fame with his first movie, Amores Perros, which is a Mexican film that actually deals with the same ideas in the whole Death trilogy he made, that is 21 Grams and Babel, about people being joined by one moment in time during their lives. And he plays a lot with time management. Like sometimes he shows the movies out of order, sometimes he shows one person follows them for a while, then cuts and follows another person from the moment they meet. And 21 Grams is a movie that showcases a lot of acting talent from Naomi Watt and Sean Penn and Benicio del Toro about people meeting in a car crash where their lives are joined in a small moment. And it's completely out of order. They show the ending first, the middle part at last, and the beginning in the middle. It's a little crazy, and it gets a little confusing if you do not know what to expect. But I think it's a movie worth looking for and watching.
Yeah, interesting choices. A Requiem, as somebody that had to watch it for a debate, it's a very in-your-face real movie. Never had the urge to try drugs, and that movie did not help with that at all. 21 Grams has actually been like in one of my watches for a while. Surprised you didn't pick The Revenant, because I think that's his. No, I'm just kidding. But like, that's a really good choice. Again, these are some of the directors that kind of flew under the radar for me. Like, again, I've only seen some of his work recently, with Birdman and stuff like that. So I think that's a really good choice. So what we're going to do, I'm going to actually shout out some people in the chat real quick because we have some people watching along. By the way, Maggie Brzakala, I think Tim will know her, says Blade Runner sucks. So that may divide a house.
Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah, she's not a fan.
Whoa. Good
Koho said
grief.
something about which one is better, HDX or UHD to Tim. But I think,
UHD. UHD is better.
Okay, so either way. And Jonathan Peck's there is putting his list so far. He has Adam McKay with Talladega Nights as 10.
Oh my
So
God.
I'm going to just stop.
Has he seen Vice? Have you seen Vice? Not sure you can put Adam McKay.
I'm going to move past that point because I don't think it's...
Except Vice is bad, but that's okay.
Okay. All right. We're going to go to 7. We're going to go to 7, and that is Paul. So, Paul, start with your 7 and move all the way to 4. One at a time.
This was a yikes from earlier. It might be another yikes, honestly. It's Chris Nolan, and the movie is Dunkirk. Nazar, do you have him on your list higher?
I have it higher.
Okay. So my number 6 is Richard Linklater, and the film is Everybody Wants Some.
Anybody?
Good choice. No.
No?
Great choice, though.
Okay.
So this is my favorite Linklater movie. Actually, the first time I saw it, I watched it 6 times in 1 week. And I think for me, it's probably the movie that I want to be in the most. I think it's got the most fun world, and the characters are all real, but sort of like heightened in a way also. And I think it's like what Linklater is best at, and that's sort of having this more fun version of reality, but having it still feel really authentic. There are little touches in all of his movies that I think make it feel more natural than other movies. Like you have characters that are singing the wrong lyrics to a song that's on the radio, or just like little small touches like that. And the way his characters talk just feel more like real people than I think a lot of other movies. And obviously the Before trilogy is amazing, and Days of Confused was almost my pick here. But Everybody Wants Some, I think, captures sort of that period in your life where like possibilities are just endless, and you're allowed to kind of be whatever you want to be. And I mean, it's got an incredible soundtrack. I think the cast is amazing. They all fit their roles perfectly. And yeah, it's a great hang of a movie, which is kind of the way that I describe a lot of Linklater movies. I think he's made a lot of honestly great work in recent years that hasn't gotten a lot of attention. I love Me and Orson Welles and like A Scanner Darkly and stuff like that. I think is really interesting. I don't know. He's kind of on the fringes of not really the mainstream, but sort of popular independent film. And I think he does great, amazing, and super original work. So that's why Linklater is my number 6.
I love this choice.
Yeah.
I saw this not like on purpose at all. I was at a friend's house and we were just watching. They picked the movie and I watched it, and I think I was the only one to like really like pay attention, kind of, because when you're with a group of friends. But I was like, it took me by surprise. I didn't expect much out of it when I started it, but then I ended up falling in love. I 100% agree with you. His films make it seem like they're real people instead of like actors. So I think this was a really good choice. We're going to do something a little different when we get to Paul's 4 after that. We're going to talk to you guys about why some of these directors missed and stuff instead of each time. So can you go to your next one?
Yeah, my number 5 is this is Steve McQueen, not the actor, but the director. The film is Shame. Nobody, yep. So
Great
Steve
movie.
McQueen, I think, is a director who I think has made 3 truly great movies and 1 really good movie. Widows I liked, but I think was just a little step down from his other work, and I think Shame is sort of his masterpiece. I think Michael Fassbender in this movie is my favorite performance of the 2010s, of any movie, any actor, male, female. I think the way that he portrays this man who has, again, it's about a sex addict, and how that's the singular kind of focus of his life, and he can't focus on anything else, and how that is consuming him and kind of shrinking his world from the outside in, is incredible. Carey Mulligan is awesome as his sister. But I think more than anything, it's about this central character and showing how this obsession sort of takes over the rest of his life. And I think that's something Steve McQueen is really great at, is making one person's singular focus kind of dwarf the rest of their life, which is, I think, a theme also in Hunger, which is his first film in 2008 with also Fassbender. But yeah, I think more than anything, Shame just goes deep into a person's psyche and understands kind of what makes them tick and why some people are kind of not, are kind of on the outskirts of society. So I think Shame is incredible.
Yeah, awesome. I have not yet to see this. This is one of those community that I've heard so much about, just have never gotten around to seeing it yet. I watched the trailer again for it, and every time I see the trailer, I want to watch it more. I think it's a very interesting movie by how it looks on the outskirts. We'll go to your next one.
And my number 4 is actually, director hasn't made a movie in 6 years, but has a movie coming out soon. It's probably, as far as like personal favorites, might be higher than this even for me. But my number 4 is Hayao Miyazaki. The movie I'm talking about is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is his second film from 1984. Nausicaa is probably my favorite movie protagonist. I think she's got such a pure sense of honor, and is such just a soul that is so wholesome and caring so much for other people and not so much about herself. I think his visual storytelling is kind of second to none in the world of animation and just in general. The worlds that he creates, obviously it's not just him and his animators, but the worlds that he is creating sort of since the late 70s always just takes me to a different place. And I think it's a movie that I could watch no matter what kind of mood I'm in. It always puts me in a better mood. And he's got this love for the planet and for Earth, I think, that is very different from a lot of filmmakers. And that's why it's a big theme in a lot of his movies. But Nausicaa is such a magical journey and has such a powerful character at the center of it that I just think it's an incredible fantasy story. And it's kind of like, for me, like shows what fantasy storytelling could do, take you to this other place and have the other place represent something sort of unique and totally of its own. And also Shia LaBeouf is the voice of the movie, so that's the thing.
I am definitely an uncultured swine when it comes to this stuff. I have already mentioned it numerous times.
Actually, Ryan, I got something here because I'm pretty sad. Yeah. I actually took this guy out of my list on a technicality. Just wanted to mention that because since he technically said he was retired.
Well, he unretired. He unretired and he has a movie coming in
director.
2020, 2021. So.
God damn it. I had Princess Mononoke on my list and I took it out because he's retired. I'm just going to say that.
So yeah, I am very uncultured with this. It's not, they don't click. I've tried. I feel bad. It's just not my.
You don't have to feel bad. If it's not for you, it's not for you.
It's just not for me. But I understand because I have some coworkers that are huge on him, and it's just not for me. But I can't deny his brilliance because again, there's some stuff that just doesn't click with everybody, like you said. So we're gonna go back to Nazario and Tim right now, just with I think there was only one yikes because that was Nolan.
Yep.
So Linkletter, McQueen's Miyazaki. You guys didn't have these guys. Why weren't they on your list? Did they not click with you? Just a little blurb from both of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I've only seen Spirited Away. That's the only Studio Ghibli film I've ever seen.
Famous line.
That is the most famous line ever.
It's very much like Cody said, where like I wanted to check it out, and it was something that I enjoyed, but it didn't grab me as much as I thought it was going to. So I'm not against delving deeper into those movies. I just haven't yet. Linklater, I really like. I never thought of him as someone I would put on the list. I kind of, I saw School of Rock when it came out, and I love that movie. Boyhood, I saw in the theater, thought it was good, and then I got the Criterion Blu-ray, watched it again, and thought it was fine. I haven't really stuck to that movie. So a lot of his movies, I've just kind of thought are good, and none have really, even Dazed and Confused, I think is fine. I actually really liked I think it's his most recent movie was Last Flag Flying, right? Yeah. I thought that was pretty good. So it's like there's not a single movie of his I've seen that I don't like. There's just none that I love a lot. So, and then what was the other one?
Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen, yeah, and I've seen Shame. Shame is fantastic. I've never seen Hunger. 12 Years a Slave is great, and I actually hated Widows. So I'm definitely in the minority there. But the other two films of his that I have seen are really brilliant. So he's great. Yeah.
And Nazario, since you didn't put somebody on your list because you just don't know good talent, apparently. No, I'm just kidding. What do you think about these directors?
Linklater is in my honorable mentions. The man has tried a bunch of different genres, and he has been excellent in everything he has tried. He actually made a real memorable Jack Black movie. He's very experimental. He likes to try different things to do, like filming a movie over 12 years or doing a trilogy about people falling in love and breaking up. And I actually had him in my honorable mentions with the movie Bernie, which I actually think is really
his favorite.
It's a hidden gem for me. Miyazaki, like I said, I spent 2 hours deciding between Princess Mononoke and Totoro, and then I took him out on a technicality, and now I feel like a moron. And Steve McQueen, it's a good director. I understand why people would enjoy his movies more, but he hasn't connected with me the way most people have. I do like Shame. I think it's his best movie yet. Something about 12 Years of Slave didn't really grab me. I saw the movie once, and I don't understand the appeal it got and won the best picture for it. And Widows is fine. It is definitely a step down from his other work, but it's not bad. It's an entertaining enough film.
Yeah. Koho has joined the chat more with some of his choices.
Oh boy.
It's not getting much better.
He just has Damien Chazelle written 10 times. It's fine.
It's just not getting much better. And Jonathan, please stop. It's not getting better from your end either. But if I put you on this list, your list would definitely suck. But
so Koho said Shame Black, by the way, not Shame.
Yeah,
Shame Black.
Shame Black. Surprised you didn't put Iron Man 3. So we're gonna go to Tim next. So you're 7 through 4?
Yes, my number 7 is, I'm not sure if you guys are gonna, Wes Anderson.
I have that.
So
you have it higher?
It's a little higher, so we'll wait.
Okay, so my number 6 is Paul Thomas Anderson.
That is a yikes for me.
Wait,
yikes.
what's it 6?
PTA.
Oh, that's insane, man. Yikes.
All right, well.
Which are the movies? You haven't seen the movies.
All right, so my number for Wes Anderson, I picked Rushmore, and for Paul Thomas Anderson, I picked Magnolia. Okay.
Interesting.
I'm getting judged. All right, number 5 is
for a different reason, but we'll talk about that later, guys. Okay.
No, my number 5 is Steven Spielberg.
Not on either one of their list.
Okay, and that's fine. I think so I should talk about it now, or I should say my 4.
Yes, then. You should talk about it now, and then.
Okay. So for my Steven Spielberg, I picked Catch Me If You Can. I think that Catch Me If You Can is my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. If I look through his canon of movies, and I look at he's Steven Spielberg. I don't know what I can really say about him that hasn't been said. He, like Nazario just said about Linklater. He's tried a lot of different genres, and most, if not all, have paid off for him. And he's not like my favorite director ever, but the reason I have him up so high on my list is because I think that like most every time I see a movie of his, I walk out getting something out of it. There's a rare few, actually more recently, that I haven't enjoyed, like The Post or Bridge of Spies. I actually kind of liked Ready Player One, but I picked Catch Me If You Can because I think that it's everything about what he does well. It's got the drama and the great performances. It's got great comedy, but it also has like a summer blockbuster feel to it, even though it is like a smaller movie. It's got like wide scope, and Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio going off of each other is absolutely fantastic. I just love that movie. I could watch that movie over and over again. It's really, really fun. And I like it more than, Jaws or Jurassic Park, even though those are probably the better movies. I just think Catch Me If You Can is
probably.
So I actually like this choice a little bit more than most because it's not just another typical person that comes on and puts Jaws as the choice, which is fine. I think Jaws is his best movie. I really do. But it's kind of an interesting choice to have somebody on there that leans to a different side. I love Catch Me If You Can. I really do. It's one of my favorites. But I'm kind of with you. I think Jaws. I think everybody knows Jaws is the better movie of his. But I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think the back and forth between Tom Hanks and Leo is amazing in this movie. Again, this is best working today, so people would say, because his recent ones have not been great. But I think his filmography still holds up from what he's done in the past and brought so many to life. So, yeah, we'll go to your next one.
So my number 4 is David Fincher, which I believe Paul had earlier.
I did, yeah. Nazari, do you not have David Fincher on your
list? Yeah, he does not have
barely made it out.
So this is the first time we're going to have an overlap here. So, Tim, what is your choice for Fincher?
Paul said his was Zodiac.
I said Zodiac. It's Zodiac.
That was my close number 2. I picked Social Network.
That was my close number 2. So
it really is a toss-up. You catch me on a day and I say that Zodiac's my favorite. You catch me on another day and Social Network's my favorite. The funny thing for me is that Zodiac I've only ever seen twice, and it has stuck with me endlessly. I saw it when it came out in 2007, I believe, and then I saw it again when it came when I bought it on Blu-ray about maybe like 5 years later, and that's it. Whereas Social Network I've seen many times, but they're both excellent movies, and I think Fincher is kind of the master at building tension and creating, even in moments of like The Social Network where it's not like a thriller or anything, he builds tensions so you are like invested and interested in a movie about Facebook. And then with Zodiac, obviously, he builds tension like nobody else. It's incredible.
I'm gonna let Paul, before I talk about Zodiac for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's funny, in my like top 100 movies of all time, Zodiac and Social Network are literally right next to each other. So it was definitely like a toss-up for me. I've actually seen Zodiac more, which probably makes me sound like a sociopath, but we're going to just go ahead and move past that. The only reason he was lower on my list, partly, is because he hasn't made a movie in 5 years, and it kind of was tough for me to handle. But also, I'm really like mixed on like his early work. As a lot of people probably know, I really, really do not like Fight Club. I'm not crazy about the game. Alien 3 is fine. I actually don't think it's as disastrous as people say, but it's not great. And yeah, Panic Room is pretty good, but I don't like Benjamin Button really at all. So his career is really mixed for me. It's just Zodiac, I think, is like maybe the best American crime film of like the last 25 to 30 years. I think the way it kind of devolves into like the mania of these 3 different men, and it shows how the 3 different men manifested, is so incredible to me. The way that Ruffalo kind of like disappears from the movie, and how he kind of just loses interest in the case and wants to leave it behind is so fascinating. And then obviously you see Robert Downey Jr.'s character completely kind of dissolve himself. But this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. Social Network is incredible. It's probably the more flawless film, but I think Zodiac kind of reaches higher and is more ambitious in a lot of ways. And I think that it delivers on that is incredible. And I don't know. I find it oddly rewatchable for a movie that's so dark and has some pretty horrifying imagery and ideas in it. But I just think it's incredible.
And all praise Jake Gyllenhaal. All praise.
Yeah. Even though I think he's actually probably the third best performance in the movie. Like, but he's still.
I wouldn't disagree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, when I was talking to somebody about Fincher, I said, "Well, there's two choices. It's either Social Network or Zodiac, and I'm okay with either."
I think
choice.
Gone Girl is a respectable choice too. I love that movie.
Love
but it's like a little like in the second tier for me. Fincher.
Probably today I lean towards Social Network a little bit more than Zodiac. I still love the dialogue and the tension throughout that movie, especially when Andrew Garfield smashes the computer and says, "You hear me now, asshole? I'm not coming back for my 8%. I'm coming back for everything." I think is one of my favorite, just lines in that movie.
Fuck you, flip flops. I believe he said.
Yeah, Sean Parker just said.
I don't. The guy who makes a nice chair doesn't owe money to everyone who's ever made a chair.
He was robbed of an Oscar nomination in that movie.
We'll also win, but we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah.
So when
that's fine. Yeah, sure.
So when Zodiac was one that I didn't see when it first came out. I saw it later.
Not many did. Not many people did. They don't have a lot of money.
But somebody asked me, they're like, "Have you ever seen Zodiac?" I was like, "No." I said, "I'm kind of a true crime kind of buff. Like I find it fascinating." So when I saw this, I was just like, "This movie is insane." Like I've seen it like probably 4 or 5 times, which is in the recent time that I've seen it a little creepy, but I think it's just acted perfectly. I think the tension, I think the story. Overall, I think the fascinating behind it, and they do it so well in the movie. So I think Fincher's a good choice. We'll talk to Nazario at the end of this, which actually we can right now. Why no Fincher? And we had kind of yikes throughout it. Why not Fincher or Spielberg for both of you guys, Paul and Nazario?
I guess I'll go first. Of course, Tim has the Spielberg movie where a character calls himself Barry Allen, and that's as predictable as can get, I guess, in some ways. But no, I think Spielberg for me has made one great movie in the last 16 years. So that's really tough for me. I think Lincoln is actually a really great movie, but I think aside from that, his recent work, especially the BFG and Ready Player One, are some of his worst work he's ever done for me. Really, besides Lincoln, the last great thing, I actually love Minority Report.
Yes.
I think that's a great movie. I would have probably had Empire of the Sun on my list if I was using Spielberg, but I think his later work just really hurts. It's just making so many movies is tough because then your chances of failure are just so high just because it's so hard to make a good movie. And then the rest of his, what were the other? I think I had the rest of the people on his list.
Yeah.
Well, Wes Anderson. He did not.
Oh yeah, Wes Anderson is pretty hit or miss. I actually hate Rushmore. I just the main character when the main character for me is so unlikable, it's hard for me to get invested. And it's not a poorly made movie.
Are you my wife? Who is that?
It's so frustrating. I can't. Max is just so unlikable. I can't get invested in his journey or he trying to romance with Rosemary. I just don't really care about him. Also, just to mention kind of one thing from earlier, Peter Jackson, Heavenly Creatures is an awesome movie, and if you guys haven't seen it, that's probably my favorite Peter Jackson movie. But yeah, and for me, just Wes Anderson is pretty hit or miss. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox and Life Aquatic, but outside of that, everything's pretty. I also haven't seen Grand Budapest, so maybe that would have changed my mind.
Actually, we'll talk about Rushmore and that in a second because I forgot Nazario was a yikes on that one. So go ahead. Why?
Yeah, I haven't said about Spielberg and Fincher, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Spielberg, basically the same thing that Paul said. His later work kind of diminishes his overall work. He has really, really high highs. And if we had made this list around 10 years ago, he probably would be in my top 10. I know Mike is going to get pissed at me saying this, but I mean, come on, man. Ready Player One, the BFG, that's a pretty big yikes. And actually, I was kind of bored by Bridge of Spies, and I haven't been able to finish The Post because I keep falling asleep.
Actually, I like The Post, but it's not great.
No, I'm with you on that one.
That's good. And David Fincher is sitting right there in my number 12 in the letterbox list that I made with Zodiac, by the way, which is the right pick. Because, I mean, like I said, up to my 14, 15, anybody could have made this list because I just kept changing it until I ran out of time. So it is what it is. Fincher is great.
Also, some of the lists in the chat, I saw Peter Farrelly Green Book, and I just clicked off because I was like, this is not happening.
Well,
Not today.
that's literally what I was just about to say. I saw that, and then I saw Paul Thomas Anderson, and Adam McKay with Talladega Nights again, and the Russo brothers at 2 for Avengers Endgame. That's just, again, I think I made the correct choice with the panel I have and not the people in the chat. So, Nazario, you're 7 to 4. Let's have it.
Okay, my number 7 is the director who actually made the best movie last year and didn't win the award for it, is Alfonso Cuarón. And the movie I picked is not last year's Roma, it's actually Y Tu Mamá También, which is a coming-of-age story with Gabriel García Bernal and Diego Luna that is an actual... It's similarly to Roma in that it's like a love letter to Mexico, and it's basically a coming-of-age story with backdrops of Mexican politics in rural Mexico areas, which is actually at the same time very interesting to watch because of the politics in the background and engaging in every level with the story that develops between these two friends and the woman they're trying to hook up with, which sounds pretty silly when you see it like that, but it develops into an actual solid relationship about discoveries, about growing up, about sexuality, and what it means to be truly friends. It's an amazing film. It doesn't have an English title. It's called Y Tu Mamá También. So if you can, I think actually it's somebody posted on YouTube the whole movie and nobody took it off. So you can probably find it there.
Yeah.
My number 6 pick.
Haven't seen.
Oh wait,
that one.
I think Cody. Yeah, Cody.
Yeah, I haven't
doing
seen
that.
that one, so I'm not going to touch that at all. Probably not even going to try to pronounce that. So we're going to go to your next one because I don't want to be disrespectful.
My next one is actually a director that I originally had way higher, and then I realized that he only basically has made 4 films in a span of almost 20 years, and I don't know if he's actually interested in making any more films. So actually, I bumped him a little down because of that. But it's Spike Jonze, and the movie I picked is the one that most people would say is his lesser movie, but I fucking love it. It's Where the Wild Things Are. Because I think it's a beautiful children's movie that is not afraid to be a little savage, a little wild, a little scary. And the best movies for children are always like that. This is based on a book that has like 20 lines. It's basically like a little poetry book with a lot of illusion,
Pop-ups, a lot of pop-ups and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's basically he makes a 90-minute movie out of it that is engaging, scary, thrilling, funny, and shows off some very good special effects for its time, and actually gets a lot of good performances through the CGI of the characters. And this little boy Max, that is just amazing. I really recommend it for people with small children because it actually makes them relate, because little children feel misunderstood most of the time, like if they were monsters, and they relate to monsters in this movie that way. It's really good. My number 5. Yep. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
You're ruining
Give Cody some time between each
Jeez.
pick.
Okay.
Not a fan of this movie. Not a fan of this movie. I was as much as any kid is a fan of this book when you're little because it's like read to you and like you're given to it. I just was not a fan of the movie as much. I think it's an interesting choice. We'll get Paul and Tim's reaction after this, but I'll let you move on because this is your next combined. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think this director was mentioned by Tim. Is Wes Anderson is my number 5.
Okay.
And the movie I picked is actually one of the ones that actually apparently Paul liked because it's my favorite film from him. It's The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which is basically a love letter to Bill Murray, and accompanied with great imagery about the story of a guy who just wants to find the shark who ate his friend, and he wants to go and find him and kill him. And the movie is lovely. It's like every Wes Anderson film feels a little bit like a fable with a lot of bright colors and a lot of whimsy, is what I would say. And it adds up to the fact that it has beautiful music, especially by Sia George, I think is his name, Sia Jorge, that sings David Bowie.
The Brazilian guy who sings David Bowie. Yeah.
That sings about David Bowie in Portuguese. And it has one of the most beautiful moments that I have experienced in cinema. And I actually cried a little bit about it when I saw it because I was taken by the moment, which is when Bill Murray is in the submarine with all the people from the movie. and he finally gets the shark. And you can hear the soundtrack by Sigur Rós playing in the background. He says, I wonder if he remembers me. It just gets me. I think it's probably Wes Anderson's most touching work, because obviously he was made for one actor, and the actor made it work.
Go ahead, Tim.
I hate The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. It is the only Wes Anderson film I cannot stand. And I don't think it's a bad movie. I think that his style is very specific, and in that movie, it just didn't work for me, whereas in his others, it did. So I don't think it has anything to do with like I get why people like it. It just did not connect with me at all. Though I picked Rushmore because it was the first one I saw, and it was what made me go, okay, this guy, what is happening? Like, this is really interesting. Went back and watched Bottle Rocket, and then I saw Grand Budapest Hotel in the theater, and then have since gone back and seen all of his movies. I actually saw Moonrise Kingdom for the first time this year. That was the last one I had to see. I loved it. So most of his work I really enjoy, but I think Rushmore, I actually kind of like it for all of the reasons that Paul said that he didn't. I love the relationship between Max and Rosemary, right, the teacher, and even Bill Murray coming in and his relationship with Max. I love that Max is writing these like really weird plays for just, I believe they do Soylent Green, or they do something like super weird as these like plays for the school. I love that. I just think that like it's a really, really good performance from Jason Schwartzman. And I think the writing has never been more spot on in any of his movies than it is in Rushmore. I do like the claymation stuff that he does with Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs, but like I think Rushmore is the one that, you know, like really put him on the map, and it's the one that like has hit me the most. It's the one I've gone back and rewatched the most, so that's why I picked it.
This is not a soccer for anybody. Zach Ford, come at me. I don't like Wes Anderson at all. He does not make movies for Cody. That's just a fact of life. I am not.
That's probably true. He probably does not go into a movie. You know,
nope.
I hope Cody Newberry really likes this one.
Really like this. Nope, not at all. The only one that I actually liked was Grand Budapest, and it's the only one that I've ever actually liked.
Wow.
And when I say liked, I would put it at the middle tier anyways, because I don't find them. I just don't like him. He is too out there and goofy for me. So yeah, not a fan. Yeah, so basically. And by the way, Malcolm and Kaleb Koho have similar lists of their top 10s on this. So I don't know how that sits with Koho, but I find it hilarious. Okay. So we're going to go to next. This is actually the one that everybody has.
Does Nazario have? Yeah, it's number 4, right?
Yeah, so everybody has this. I'm going to start with Nazario and then move our way back that had him lower. So go ahead, Nazario.
One last thing about Wes Anderson. I actually took me a while to get around to Grand Budapest Hotel. I don't know why. It's the movie he has been more acclaimed for since Royal Tenenbaums. But for some reason, I didn't get to it when it was in theaters, and then I had the Blu-ray for a while, and I just sat there. When I finally saw it like 2 weeks ago, that movie is not great. I mean, it's solid, but he has so much better work than this.
Well, see, I think that movie, the reason like I love that movie so much is kind of the reason like you're loving Life Aquatic. Like that movie is all on Ray Fiennes, and like if it's not him, the movie doesn't work. And I think he's perfect in the movie. Whereas the same reason why if like Bill Murray was in Life Aquatic, that movie wouldn't.
This is actually like my sixth circle of hell. We're talking about Wes Anderson way too freaking much. So we're gonna go to a good director. So
okay, 4. My number 4 is Christopher Nolan.
Okay.
The movie I picked was Insomnia.
Oh, great choice.
Ooh,
okay, so
that's
interesting. It's very
choice.
Interesting that each person picked a different Nolan movie, so I'm very interested to see how this goes. Nazario, you start, and then we'll go down.
I picked Insomnia because, for the same reason I picked some of the other movies, I feel in his oeuvre is one of the probably least talked about. Is his second film after Memento? Well, third film after Memento. And it actually has really solid acting. It's a remake from a Norwegian movie, I think, from a few years earlier, and I think that Al Pacino is solid in it. I think Robin Williams is. He actually always spoke about the three roles that he had. That way he was supposed to be like a darker character. It was like Dead to Smooshy, Insomnia, and 1 Hour Photo that he did like back to back. And I think this is the middle one. I think that his acting in this one is very against type, but very good. I think 1 Hour Photo is slightly superior in his quality acting. And overall, the movie works. It's a mystery. You never really know if Al Pacino is doing what he's doing because he wants to cover his ass, or he actually had a reason to do it until the very least. And at the very end of the movie, and Hilary Swank is also very solid as a cop who actually starts doubting the reasons why Al Pacino is doing what he's doing. It's a very interesting thriller. It's a smaller film, but it's really solid, and I think it's worth to be part of his filmography.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to Paul next because Paul
Okay.
had Nolan a little higher than you. So
Sure.
give us your next one, Paul.
Yeah, I think
you picked Dunkirk.
Nolan is one of the most distinct directors I think out there. I think if someone would show you any scene from any of his movies, I think you could very quickly identify it as him. And he's got a lot of issues, frankly. Like he doesn't write women well, and some of his writing in general is just very questionable. But I think what he can achieve in terms of spectacle, not just visually, but I think just like narratively, is kind of unlike almost any director that we have now. His movies are all very different, and I picked Dunkirk because I think it's the movie that is like really like most underappreciated, probably. Like obviously it got critically lauded and got a lot of Oscar nominations, but I think a lot of people point to it as sort of lesser Nolan and like, oh, it's technically impressive, but it's not emotional. But I find the film incredibly emotional. I think what it says about sort of human courage and cowardice also, when you see the two men hiding on the bridge and not trying to get sent back out there. You just see like very raw versions of humanity that are in different mindsets. And I think you see these different people in the different ways that they approach the situation. When you have, like Kenneth Branagh as the commanding officer, and then Mark Rylance is bringing his ship over. I think it's just it's gorgeous. And I think it's like he plays with time in a lot of his movies. And I think that's very fascinating. And I think that Dunkirk in a lot of ways is like sort of his least Nolan-y movie, but I think it's kind of why it's one of his best. I think he kind of gets away from some of the traps he falls into a lot of times. I will say I haven't seen Inception. That's kind of my biggest cinematic blind spot out there. So maybe that would be my pick if I had seen it. But I just think Dunkirk is really remarkable and a serious achievement, not just in directing, but just in storytelling as a whole. And I like my favorite's The Prestige, but I think Dunkirk is pretty close.
I have something to say about that in a second. We're going to go to Tim, though.
Yeah, am I allowed to comment on that, or should I just say my choice and we'll comment?
Say your choice, and we'll talk about it.
All right, so my choice was Batman Begins because, I like the comic book movies, and so if you take Batman out of it, it's The Prestige for me. But I think Batman Begins is the strongest out of the Dark Knight trilogy because I think that the Dark Knight, it's the Dark Knight. Like I could say how I feel about the third act, and people will be like, "You're wrong." So it's like
the fourth act. The fourth
there
act.
you go. Right, there you go. Heath Ledger's great in the movie, but it doesn't feel like a Batman movie to me. It's a Joker movie. I still love it, don't get me wrong, but Batman Begins is like through and through Bruce Wayne's story, and I like seeing this origin, and I think that Liam Neeson is really strong, and coming off of movies like Memento and Insomnia, seeing how he can do those like smaller stories, but like Paul was saying, playing with time, doing interesting things in those movies, that he can come up and do this huge summer blockbuster, reinvigorate this franchise that so many people love after it was down in the pooper, thanks to Joel Schumacher, is really, really impressive. And not only just make a fun summer movie, but also make like a movie where you care about the characters, even though they're in costumes and running around the place. So that's my favorite Nolan movie. But again, I pretty much love all of his movies, save for one and two, I guess, if you include Following. So yeah.
Okay, so I will touch on it. Nolan is great. There's no question about it. Can't stand Dunkirk. No offense, just can't stand it. I think it's a beautiful film. I really do. but I do not emotionally connect with many of the characters. I think, and I don't know if that's the point of the story, but that's kind of what I go in for a movie, to try to connect at some point, and I just never could. I find it very boring. But that's just my take on it. I know that I'm in the vast
not in this community. You're not. Let me
Yeah,
tell you that.
actually,
Not in this
yeah,
community. You're
it's
not.
more people will talk about it more. I watched it twice. It wasn't for me. Insomnia, I think it's an interesting choice. I don't know if it's his best. I think it's good, but I don't think it's great. Batman Begins is my favorite comic book movie, so like I kind of lean towards that, just because I love how they set all that up and the story that's built through it. I like The Prestige a lot, so I probably would put that as his top because I think it's an interesting choice. But I have no problem. I think Nolan arguably is one of the best working directors today. He is one that everybody will try to run out and see the next Nolan movie regardless what the concept is. So I think that's cool. Just real quick, not a lot of time spent on it, but Paul, Tim, Nazario, all you guys pick different movies. Is there any issues that you have with the other people's choices and stuff like that?
Tim can go first. I think he had a thought about Dunkirk here.
Well, I like Cody. I saw Dunkirk in the theater. I saw it in 70 millimeter. It was awesome in the theater. Loved it. And then I bought it on Blu-ray, 4K. Watched it, and again thought it was brilliantly shot, directed, acted, and everything. It just doesn't connect with me. So I think it's a fun movie to look at, a great movie to look at, but it didn't have that emotional connection to me like it did to you. Same thing kind of goes with Insomnia. I think it's a great movie. I've only seen it once, but I really, really enjoyed it. But when it comes to Nolan, I don't really, at this point, go for the emotional connectivity. I go for the big spectacle. And even with a movie like Interstellar, which a lot of people don't like, I really like that movie. I think that movie is visually like one of the best looking movies ever made. And I think it's actually probably the one I connect to the most visual or like most emotionally. Anything involving like a father and child story is gonna like pull me in, like that automatically gets me there. But all of his movies are pretty great. Like there's not a bad pick unless you really, really hate Dunkirk like Cody.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Okay. And Nazario or Paul, which one?
Nazar can go in.
I don't think any of the picks are actually bad. I have no reference on Paul's number 8 pick for Afterlife because I haven't seen the movie or the work from the director. The one I would say is kind of iffy for me is Tim's number 10, which is Peter Jackson, for the reasons he himself listed. Because, I mean, he has been pretty on and off with most of his movies because the Hobbit trilogy is just weird.
What are you talking about? Nolan. We're talking about Nolan.
Oh, I misunderstand. Sorry.
You're fine. We're talking about Nolan.
He's just here to bash me.
Like, if you want to look at Peter Jackson, we can in a second, but I need mine.
Sorry. No, I mean, all the movies that they pick. Yeah, Batman is my favorite of the trilogy. I can understand why people would like Dark Knight better. But I think that Batman Begins is the most complete Batman story that it has been put on screen. So it's a great pick. And what was Dunkirk? Yeah, Dunkirk. The thing is, yeah, I don't feel that. Yeah, like you said, I saw it. It was a great spectacle of a movie. It had a lot of technical prowess, but I didn't connect because the characters are not developed in a way that is easy for you to connect to them. They're basically there to tell a very specific story that span a very short amount of time, so you don't really get to like invest, in my opinion. But I don't think it's lower tier Nolan either. I actually think that it's actually a very decent, very good movie that actually goes to more of his strengths as a director instead of trying to go to the parts he's more weak at. So as a movie, as a concept of a story told in a very specific way, I think actually Dunkirk is a really good movie. I wouldn't put it even in the lower half.
Okay, and Paul, real quick.
Yeah, I just don't really like Insomnia that much. I think it's a pretty middling potboiler. It's a pretty interesting story, but I think that there's nothing really particularly great about the way it's told or any of the characters. I don't think are incredibly interesting. Batman Begins I like quite a bit, but I think it's just hampered by sort of the conventions of comic book storytelling and sort of the Batman of it all, that it has to kind of check these certain boxes. And I think some of that stuff takes away from what it had potential for as a narrative. And again, yeah, I get not connecting with Dunkirk. I think that having these people represent pieces of the puzzle rather than them being big factors is what makes it meaningful for me. I think that sort of the futility of them all trying to band together with this kind of British stiff upper lip heroism is what makes it connect for me. And I think that like editing and the way it's thrown around is like kind of what helps it achieve that. But yeah, I mean, Insomnia is like fine. It's not a bad movie. I just don't think it plays a lot of Nolan's strengths. It's pretty contained, and I think almost anyone could have made that movie, where I think only Nolan could have made something like Dunkirk. But I think, they're not bad choices. It's just not the choices that I made, obviously.
All right, so we're going to number threes now. So Paul's going to start it off with number 3.
My number 3 is not a director who's made a lot of films, but they are all, I think, incredible. My number 3 is Barry Jenkins. The film. No, anybody?
Nope.
No, not even on the list
Jenkins,
at all. Okay. The movie I chose is his first feature film, Medicine for Melancholy, which is from 2008, which is shot in black and white. It's about two people who have a one-night stand and then eventually start to sort of develop romantic feelings for each other. And I think it plays to his greatest strengths as a director, which is displaying kind of people and their passions and how they fall in love and what love means to different people. I think that's a serious running through line through all his movies. Moonlight's probably his best movie. I think it's probably one of the best movies made in this last 20 or so years. But I think Medicine is severely underseen. I think a lot of people think that Moonlight's his first movie, which is kind of sad to me, because I think Medicine is such an incredible character piece about two people trying to figure out who they are and seeing whether their identities make them incompatible with each other or whether they can sort of let kind of love reign at the end of the day. And I mean, Beale Street's incredible, but I think Medicine is one that I wish more people would have seen, and is, I think, just a masterclass in storytelling across all sort of different levels. So I don't know. I think Barry Jenkins has made 3 movies. They're basically all near perfect. So yeah, I think he's, again, one of the best directors out there. Cody, you're muted, so you're talking.
Oh, thanks. Terrible at my own show. I think it's a interesting thing you brought up, that people would think Moonlight is his first, and that's probably true. I saw Moonlight, and I didn't hear of the director before, really. And I watched the trailer for this one, and it made me want to go see it, because I think Moonlight is an amazing movie. One that I had zero expectations going into at all, because I didn't know much about it, but I was just trying to see, the Best Picture nominees before the Oscars, and this one popped up, and I thought it was amazing. Way better than La La Land, I will give you that.
Yeah.
But Barry Jenkins, yeah, great. I think great director. I'm excited for whatever he puts out next. I think he's a phenomenal director.
It's, by the way, crazy anecdote. He wrote Beale Street and Moonlight screenplays within like a week of each other while on like vacation in Europe. He just wrote them in like a 1.5 month span. So that's just great.
That's nuts.
That just doesn't make sense.
They're adaptations, granted. It's not original, but that's
still
crazy.
He put it down. Number 3, Tim, go.
You don't want us to comment on that?
Oh, you can if you like.
I was just gonna say that the first time I saw Moonlight, I thought it was fine, but when I revisited it after it won the Oscar, I thought it was amazing. It's not like my favorite thing in the world because it's tough to watch, but it's masterful. I think if Beale Street Could Talk is his best movie, though. I think Beale Street's phenomenal. I love that movie. It was in my top 10 last year. It's fantastic. It was snubbed of all of the awards last year. But my number 3, unless Nazario wants to comment on 3.
Barry Jenkins, real quick.
I am actually one of those people that actually thought Moonlight was his first film. That's
yeah,
how.
I mean, it's understandable.
That's how limited access we get in this country, honestly. And yeah, and actually one of the reasons I didn't put Barry Jenkins is because I thought he only made 2 movies. Even though I love both, I just finally saw Beale Street because it came to Hulu like a month ago. So I finally got to watch it, which is actually a very lovely film. I think Moonlight is stronger overall, but I think Beale Street is really, really like a lovely, beautiful film. And I just figured he needed to do some more work before I could tell him one of the best working directors, because he didn't have a big enough pool for me to see.
Fair enough. Go to number 3.
All right, my number 3 is a bit of a cheat. I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to be the only person with this on the list.
I think I know what this is.
It is a bit of a cheat. I picked Francis Ford Coppola.
I don't think it's that much of a cheat, honestly. He made a movie same year as Miyazaki.
Yeah, he had a movie in 2011, and he has one on his IMDb coming up. So I picked The Godfather. I originally had it at number 2, but I lowered it down because I realized I was cheating a little bit. But the thing about Coppola is I haven't seen a ton of his work, but the ones I have seen, except for Godfather Part 3, the ones I have seen are perfect films, in my opinion. I think Part 1 and Part 2 for Godfather, perfect. Apocalypse Now, perfect. And so I just rewatched Godfather Part 1 and 2 in the theater this year. And that was an incredible experience because I had only seen them on Blu-ray. So to see them in the theater, I was telling Cody last night that it completely changed my perspective on those movies. And I guess before that, I hadn't seen them in about 3 or 4 years, and I always considered them good movies, but I considered them like, just kind of like talkies. There's not a lot of exciting stuff. They're just kind of, it's whatever. And then I saw it in the theater, and it completely changed my perspective. I think The Godfather, from beginning to end, is so engaging, which is incredibly hard to do for a 3-hour movie. And then even Godfather Part 2 is just, they're incredibly well directed, incredibly well acted. He knows exactly what to do with every character and every piece of the puzzle, and to tell a story that goes from over the course of so many years and shove it into a 3-hour movie and make it digestible and understandable for a mainstream audience is insane. And the fact that both movies won Best Picture is just like insanity. So that's why I picked The Godfather.
Fair. We are running a little short on time, so quick on Francis Ford Coppola, Nazario, and Paul.
Have you seen Jack?
No.
Yeah.
Don't.
Figures.
Or Peggy Sue got it. Neither of those are necessary.
I think you should have picked Jack on the list. Okay. But anyways, we'll go to Nazario's thing.
My number 3, I guess, is a little predictable. If you know me, if you know things I kind of like. So I'm going with Quentin Tarantino.
Higher.
Okay. All right. So
the movie I picked was Jackie Brown.
Ugh.
Okay.
right.
We'll go to Paul's number 2.
So my number 2 is Yikes from earlier, and that's Paul Thomas Anderson.
Okay.
I have that higher.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Just for the record, the film is Inherent Vice. So yeah.
okay.
Ooh.
So my number 2 is Quentin Tarantino.
Okay. And what'd you pick?
I picked Inglourious Basterds.
All right. Let's hear about it.
Yeah, so I think that there's only one Tarantino movie I don't like, and that's
Let me guess.
what? No, it's not Jackie Brown.
Oh.
It is. I can't even think of the name of it right now. That's much. The Grindhouse one.
Death Proof.
Death Proof. Thank you, Jesus. I've seen it once, didn't like it. I've never gone back to revisit it. Jackie Brown, I've seen twice, and it is one that I don't go back to a lot. I think it's fine. I'm not a huge fan of it, but everything else he's made, I think, is near perfection. Again, was telling Cody last night that I think that everybody goes to Pulp Fiction right away. It was a little too hyped for me by the time I saw it. It wasn't the first Tarantino movie I saw, and so it's never really lived up to that hype for me, but it's still a great film. But I much prefer the later stuff like Inglourious Basterds, Django, and even Hateful Eight I really, really like. And I think just like his dialogue is unlike anything else, and I just love being in his worlds. Everything from Kill Bill to Inglourious Basterds. I think Inglourious Basterds, the reason I like it so much is the characters specifically in that movie. I think that Brad Pitt, Daniel Bruhl, my boy who won the Oscar, whose name I'm completely blanking on right now.
Christoph Waltz.
Christoph Waltz.
Thank you, Christoph Waltz. Jesus Christ. But there's a reason like he won the Oscar, and there's a reason Tarantino has won screenplay so many times. Or twice, I believe. It's because it's dialogue. But I mean, that's more than a lot of other people. So it's like his dialogue is so good, and just that opening scene of Inglourious Bastards alone with Christoph Waltz sitting at the table, just having a conversation alone from the dialogue builds tension, and it's just fascinating work. And there's no other director out. Well, there's one other director out there, but this is he constantly makes movies that are long as shit, but keep me engaged the entire runtime. There's not even the one, even Jackie Brown, which I think is fine. I'm engaged for the whole 2.5 to 3 hours. So yeah, Quentin Tarantino's the best.
Jackie Brown, go ahead, Nazario.
I think I don't remember whose quote it said, but good movies are never as long as they should be, and I think this applies to
Ebert. It's Ebert, yeah. And then no bad movie is short enough.
The thing is that I have never felt bored with a Tarantino film. I love every single one of them, even Death Proof, which most people seem to be the one they say is not good enough. I think the fact that it was joined with Planet Terror, which I kind of makes you see what that Robert Rodriguez was kind of spoofing bad movies from the 70s, and Tarantino just made a movie that felt from the 70s. And the shocking of the styles didn't really pay off for people. I picked Jackie Brown because for the same reason I mentioned the other movies, I think it gets a little overlooked in his oeuvre. I don't think anybody needs me to tell them to go watch Kill Bill, Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, Pulp Fiction, or Reservoir Dogs. But a lot of people haven't seen Jackie Brown, adapted from Rum Punch, which actually is a very, very interesting heist movie. Is a heist movie in a way you didn't really expect it to be, because it stars older people. I don't think any of the main characters is below 40, and it actually gives people room to act and delve into this web of intrigue that is very interesting on a smaller scale, and it's never boring. It keeps you engaged. It's like Tim said, but people, they keep talking and talking, or they can, if you have an engaging conversation, you could be talking about paint, but if you make it work, then you make it work. And I think this movie, people were expecting more of a Pulp Fiction kind of thing, because of the two movies he made first, and he kind of changed speed on people, which took them by surprise. But if you like Tarantino and you haven't seen this one, you should go back and rewatch it, because Jackie Brown is a gem. It's a solid film.
Real quick, Paul, Tarantino didn't make your list.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Tarantino's got one really perfect, great movie, and that's Reservoir Dogs. I think it's the least indulgent Tarantino movie. I think after that, he kind of gets in his own head a little too much for me, and it just feels like he's trying to put himself into every character, and I feel like the characters all have the same voice, and that kind of bothers me and takes me out of the story a lot of times. So none of his movies are necessarily bad, but I just think that there's sort of a certain level that they don't cross beyond for me, just because it all feels like they're the same people having the same kinds of conversations, and maybe just because it's not novel anymore. Like, I didn't see his movies when they first came out, so it's kind of tough for me to really judge. But for me, Reservoir Dogs is a masterpiece, and I love True Romance, which obviously he didn't direct. But beyond that stuff, I think his movies are just kind of really good for me. And yeah, none of them really speak to me on that sort of high level, which is kind of, just not the director for me. Like, I've seen his movies, they're good, but I don't know. Something missing.
I find it hilarious that we mentioned Tarantino and Sean Sandberg pops up in the chat. That's funny to me. You are literally just predictable. All right, so we're going to go to number one. Paul.
Oh, I have my two. I haven't said my two.
Two. Yes, sorry, you're two.
For my two, I pick a director that I don't know. No, I don't expect many people to agree with my opinion, but it's a director that I have seen most of. If it's not all of his work, but most of his work, and everything I've seen is interesting. I pick Lars von Trier.
Oh, wow. That is not where I thought this was going.
Me either.
Oh.
Wow, so no, he's not on the list. That's crazy.
And the movie I picked is Dancer in the Dark. A little biased here because Björk is my favorite singer. Björk and Radiohead are my two favorite musical artists. And the way that they work, she made her work with him in this film. Even if she decided she never wanted to act again in her life, I think that the end result was worth it. Lars von Trier is probably a jackass. Everybody who works with him says a bunch of bad things about him, but I don't think you can you have to separate a little bit of the person from the art, and I think his movies are real solid. Breaking the Waves is one of my favorite movies of all time. Dogville is really interesting. Manderley is really good. The Nymphomaniac ones are a little too Von Trier-y, but they're not bad. And the House Jack build that just came out last year, it's insane, but it's great. But I picked Dancer in the Dark because it's basically a deconstruction of a musical. Because they start from the base that musicals have to be big, showy, and fun and happy, and it picks the saddest fucking story you've ever seen with the saddest freaking twist you'll ever see and make a musical out of it. If you hate musicals, you would probably like this film. It's insane the way it just twists everything, and it just flips it on its head and makes it work in an interesting way. So yeah, Von Trier for 2 with Dancer in the Dark.
Haven't seen it. I had to look it up when you brought it up, so that's fair. Paul and Tim, any quick thoughts on this?
Yeah, quickly, I've only seen Nymphomaniac 1 and 2. So that is my pool from Lars von Trier. Didn't like them. Thought they were interesting, but overall didn't like them, and I've never had any interest in going back. Respect the choice. It's not for me.
Yeah, kind of little funny story for me. I woke up at like 8 o'clock in the morning, when I was moving out of LA from my temporary apartment there to go see House that Jack Built director's cut at like 9 a.m. Just so I could see it in the theater and also so I could see the director's cut. So I'm actually like a pretty big fan. Dance in the Dark and Melancholia are probably the two most depressing movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And after I watch them, I feel like I have to sort of crawl into a ball for a week. But I think he's a pretty incredible filmmaker. I think some of his movies are a little too self-indulgent. I don't really like Antichrist. And some of his other work is, I think, just too like Von Trier. He's trying too hard for that style that he goes for. But I think, Dogville is incredible. And yeah, Dancer in the Dark and Breaking the Waves are amazing too. There's something where it's just hard for me to put a director on that I feel like I don't feel excited to see his movies, even though they're all like pretty incredible and very powerful. But yeah, just not quite the one for me, I guess.
Fair enough. Paul, give us your number one, which I'm surprised that no one else had on their list.
Whoa, I honestly thought this was going to be potentially Tim's number one. My number one is a director who I think has had a movie in my top 5 3 years in a row. The last 3 times he's made movies. It's Denis Villeneuve. The movie that I picked is Sicario. So nobody? All right, nobody.
No.
Sicario.
When you're done.
Sicario is probably my favorite of his movies. Yeah, even though I love Arrival, love Blade Runner 2049. Actually, I haven't seen Prisoners. Love Enemy. And Sam Dees is really good too. But for me, like, Sicario has kind of become underappreciated, partially because the sequel, I think, was a little botched. So I think it's a little viewed in a different light now. But I think it was so powerful at the time where it tackled the idea of the way that America approaches the cartels. And I think, like, thematically, it's very dense in that way. I think the scene at the border is one of the best scenes I've seen in the last 5 or so years. I think it's so tense and so thrilling. And I love Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin, walking around with flip-flops in the FBI office is just like pure Josh Brolin. But again, I think all of his movies just bring something so unique and so different to the table, but he allows his actors to kind of play within the character and sort of branch out past what you might think of their characters as being. And I think he's just an incredible director. Every movie he's made, I'm so excited to see it. He's probably the director who, if all these people had movies coming out, I'd probably go to see his first. And I think Dune's going to be amazing, hopefully at least. And I think pretty much everything he's made is a masterpiece. So yeah, Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, so I'm really surprised by this. I think he is arguably one of the best, probably the best director working today. Even though I'm not a big fan of Arrival, as much as most people. It just didn't click with me as much. I felt like I didn't like how it ended. Personally, that was my only takeaway. I thought everything leading up to that was really good. But I think Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, Prisoners, Enemy, I think those are insane. He's kind of the person that I trust to do pretty much any. Even though I wasn't a fan of Arrival, I can still give him full credit. Just because it didn't connect with me, it's not like I'm saying it's a bad movie. It's just I wasn't a fan. But I will 100% agree with you. Sicario, that scene at the border is insane. Closest thing I've ever had to almost a panic attack in the theater because it literally, that's what it makes you feel. So I thought it was beautiful from start to finish. Just real quick, let's not go into a huge because we're way over on time at this point. But Nazario, Tim, did
Real
not have
quick.
him at all. Go ahead.
Real quick, that is a huge mistake on my part. And if I could redo this list, he'd be number 2. I don't know why he didn't even pop in my brain. Somebody in the chat brought him up, and I went, fuck, and immediately added him to my honorable mentions. Like you said, you haven't seen Prisoners. It's perfect. It was his first movie that I saw. And then Arrival, Enemy, Blade Runner. They're all great. I haven't seen Incendies yet, but I hear that movie's fantastic. It's on Netflix. I'm going to watch it soon.
It's really sad. It's good.
Yeah, but the movies I have seen of him, I've literally given all 5 out of 5s to. So I don't know why he escaped my brain, but he did. If I could redo this, he'd be my number 2. I love his movies. So, yeah.
I have Denis Villeneuve at 11 right there, sitting next to Zodiac at number 12. I actually took Denis Villeneuve out today because I wanted to put Pedro Almodovar as number 10. And tell people to actually, something I forgot to say, that is he's had a new movie coming out called Passion and Glory, and it starts here today.
With Banderas, and it won Best Actor at Cannes,
Yeah, I don't know when it opens in the United States, but it's opening this week here, so it's pretty amazing. But yeah, Denis Villeneuve, man, it's it's an incredible direction.
Yes. So Tim's next one, I don't know if he was just trying to win your list sucks, but he did a damn good job of it. I can't wait to see Paul's reaction to this. Give us your number 1.
Does Paul not like this director?
No,
Oh,
it's
God.
not that I don't think he likes it. I just think it's going to be an interesting choice from him. And
Okay.
So.
My number 1 is Martin Scorsese, The Departed. Martin Scorsese is the reason I fell in love with film. I pretty much enjoy every single movie I've ever seen of his, except for like Boxcar Bertha and New York, New York.
Whoa, the New York slander. Take it easy.
I mean, I don't like that movie very much, but everything else I've seen of his, I either like or absolutely fucking love. And I don't know how people feel about The Wolf of Wall Street, but that is, I love that movie to pieces. That's the movie that made me fall in love with movies. But then I went back and saw The Departed, and again was completely moved and changed. I think that was when I started to fall head over heels in love with Scorsese, anything he's ever directed. We want to talk about directors who have tried pretty much everything. He's done intense, hardcore dramas. He's done gangster movies, which are like crime gangsters, like my favorite genre. He's done dark comedies. He's done romantic, like not rom-coms, but he's done romance films. He's done biblical epics. He's done everything, and he's amazing at everything. I think he... I just love his worlds and his characters, and even a movie as like I don't know, like Last Temptation of Christ. I think it's a pretty average movie, but it's elevated by his direction and by What?
No, come on.
We'll get to it.
I love Scorsese. He's the best. He's my favorite director. I will rush out to see everything. Even his newest movie, Silence, I think is perfect. I love him. Yes, Scorsese.
Yeah, there's enough videos out there saying how much I love The Departed. I think it's an amazing movie. Yeah, it's my favorite Scorsese. Every time I say that, Chance Elliser goes, what?
Well,
because Leo's
cares
in
about what
it.
he
And
says?
Is that when he pretends to have seen Infernal Affairs and says it's better, even though he probably hasn't seen it?
That's probably accurate. Yeah.
Oh, on that one. Okay, we're good. He's too big to watch this anyway, so we're fine with that. We're going to go to Paul and Nazario. Scorsese, just real quick. Real quick.
Quick thing. I don't think Last Temptation is average. I think that's one of his best movies. I think it's such an interesting exploration of faith.
Yeah, when I say average, I just mean like I love all of his movies. It's one of the ones I don't go revisit enough.
That's fair. It's probably one of my favorites. After Hours is my favorite Scorsese movie. I think that's what I kind of love about his style the most. Again, don't really like Goodfellas. It's just a thing. I don't really like Goodfellas that much, and I haven't seen Wolf of Wall Street. So what are you gonna do? I actually love The Departed, which is kind of probably surprising coming from me, but I found it endlessly quotable, and I love Silence. But it's tough. He was pretty close to making my list. Some of his recent efforts have just not hit as much for me, and not a crazy big fan of Hugo. I don't like Shutter Island really, and it's just I don't know. It's just one of those. It was really close, and I love a lot of his movies. I actually don't think he's as diverse of a filmmaker as you say. A lot of his movies tend to be thematically similar and stylistically similar, even though they're technically in different genres. I think he approaches filmmaking pretty similarly a lot of times, but he's a great director. And I think if this was at a different era, maybe I would have put him on the list, but just not quite there for me. Even though I love Departed and Aviator's great and love Silence, but just some of his stuff is kind of up and down. He's had a long career and some misses, I think, but it's close, but it's not quite for me.
Rosario, real quick.
I actually am hurt that he said that The Last Temptation of Christ was average. That is my favorite film. And that's why I yelled what? I think it's a little delayed in the feed, but come on. And come on, Paul. Hugo is also excellent. It's one of my favorite Scorsese films, too. It's probably in my top 5. And I guess the same reason that Paul said is not in his list. I think it's probably like an era thing. He was a very strong filmmaker, I feel, in the 70s, 90s, and 80s. And he also kept going with solid, good movies in the 2000s, but I don't think his best work has come in the later part. So that's why I didn't make my list, but it's a good choice.
Okay. So now it's going to go to Rosario. I'm just going to get my cards on the table. I am not a fan of this director. There is one movie that I actually really, really, really enjoy, and somebody did pick it. But other than that, blah. I'm sorry. I get it. Okay. Give us this PTA just circle jerk. Here we go. Go ahead.
All right. Let's
Tell
do
how
it.
great he is.
Paul Thomas
Rosario,
Anderson.
you're first.
Paul Thomas Anderson is the best director working right now. I mean, it was the first thing I wrote on my list, and it never moved from number 1. He has made, I think it's my number 3 favorite movie of all time, which actually I didn't put in this list, but thanks Tim for putting it because it's Magnolia. It's my number 3 in my top 100. And I decided to go instead in this list with Punch Drunk Love, which is actually kind of one of his 2 movies that I think are a little more off-brand, and Paul picked the other one, because it shows that he doesn't have to be boxed in the style of the extended fantasy movie. He can actually make a 90-minute movie that feels complete and satisfying. And it also shows that Adam Sandler can actually fucking act, because he carries this movie with great supporting work by Emily Watson, which is one of my favorite actresses, and Philip Seymour Hoffman, rest in peace, which is also turns out great in this film. The movie itself is a very quirky, insane romantic comedy about a guy who represses a lot of anger and what happens when he actually decides to step out of his repression and let it go out in the name of love. It's a way better film about this than Anger Management that also Adam Sandler did, because that movie is just not fun. And this is just a beautiful little comedy that if people have missed it or haven't chosen not to watch it, you should definitely go back and see.
Who had him next higher?
I think Paul probably.
I
had him at. I had him at.
He was my 2. He was my 2.
Okay,
I had him lost.
For me, I think he might be maybe arguably even a better director than Denis. I think Denis' films might just hit me a little harder, but I picked Inherent Vice. I actually watched this today just to sort of reaffirm the fact that this was my choice. And I think it's his most underrated film in a lot of ways. It's the first ever adaptation of a Thomas Pynchon novel, who is a notoriously hard to adapt author, and his ideas are very hard to manifest. But I think PTA somehow nails this feeling of sort of like aimlessness, and the way that Doc Sportello, played by Joaquin Phoenix, sort of ebbs in and out of different people's lives, out of different areas of Los Angeles, again, which is a place he loves to explore, is incredible. I think it's super funny. I think his most underrated aspect is all his movies are hilarious, and a lot of them don't get credit for that. Phantom Thread I thought was also hilarious, but in a slightly more dark way. But I think that he is able to express really complicated and kind of ununderstandable ideas in ways that are very cinematic and satisfying and interesting. And his characters are always just incredibly memorable. Again, I don't think he's ever made a bad film. I think all his movies are at least B+, A-. Punch Drunk might be even my favorite, actually. The scene where he kicks the glass door just makes me die laughing every single time when they're at dinner. But again, Inherent Vice is sort of his most difficult to make movie, and I think that's what makes it most impressive. He takes these crazy ideas and sort of bottles them into one super memorable, great film that I think becomes a lot better the more you watch it and the more you can understand what's going on. It's tough to unpack, but I think once you do, it's really satisfying. There's a lot there to sort of chew on, which is why that was my pick, even though it's maybe not my favorite or even top 2 or 3 of his movies. But I just think he's a masterful director who just makes incredible movie after incredible movie. Again, great first name.
Paul picked the movie that I enjoy. The rest, not so much. Tim, go ahead. Tell me about the flags.
Funny enough, Punch Drunk Love is probably also my favorite, but Magnolia is the last one I had to see. I watched his movies in a very weird order. I was kind of all over the place, and the only one I haven't seen is Hard 8. I don't know if it's worth watching.
It's really good.
Yeah, so the reason I picked Magnolia is because it is the most recent one I saw, and I actually got a chance to see it in the theater, and so that's why I went to go and see it. And I didn't know like the twist or like I didn't know about the frogs, and I don't want to give it away if somebody in the chat hasn't seen it. But when that happened and the whole movie kind of came together, it became something so much more than it thought it was, and it made me re-examine the entire movie to the point where I went home and watched it again, like the next day. Like, absolutely loved it. Again, it's probably not my favorite. I think it was just I was so surprised that a director who I had seen like most of his other movies and loved could still like I could see something else from him that I just loved.
Surprise you.
Yeah, it surprised me. And like I thought Phantom Thread was good. I didn't love it, but I thought it was good. It is pretty much bolstered by the performances. But Boogie Nights, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, The Master, There Will Be Blood, like they're all so well done. The Master was also the other one I was kind of flirting with because I think Joaquin is just on a whole nother fucking level in that movie. But yeah, I think he's a divisive director because I think you either love him or you hate him. I think more people love him than hate him, but like Cody or my wife. Well, my wife's first PTA movie was Phantom Thread, so that was rough.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I love Magnolia. I love both of your choices too. Inherent Vice is wacky and fun, and Punch Drunk Love is great. So yeah.
Paul picked definitely 3 talkers on this episode. We are way over on time. You guys get 2 honorable mentions apiece. No more, no less. Pick them and go. I'm going to go with Paul first.
I'm going to pick 2 sort of under the radar ones. The closest one to my list is a female director named Kelly Reichardt, who does a lot of independent films, often with Michelle Williams. The film I would have picked is Old Joy, but she makes incredibly personal and quiet movies that I think are different than anything that I've seen lately. The other one is another anime director named Mamoru Hosoda, who directed Mirai last year, which was nominated for Best Animated Feature. I actually met him in person. He's an incredibly sweet and charming individual, but all his movies, again, just ooze this human, beautiful, serene quality that I think anime is so good at capturing, and I think he's just an incredibly humanistic and amazing director that just barely missed the list.
Nazario, go. Well, you've actually mentioned yours, but go ahead.
I want to skip a bunch of the ones already mentioned to try to put something different in the table. I'm going to go with Steven Soderbergh, which is another filmmaker that I think has been solid from beginning to end. And I'm going to go with one that is a little off kilter, a little insane, but because, I mean, you just have to forget about The Lone Ranger and the Pirates of the Caribbean, because if you see the rest of the of Gore Verbinski, he has made some very interesting films.
Cure for Wellness is I like that movie a lot.
Cure for Wellness, The Weatherman, and even Rango.
Rango is incredible. Incredible.
And his adaptation of The Ring is actually pretty solid too. If you see his work other than the most popular work, he actually has a solid resume.
The first Pirates is awesome, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And Tim. Real quick.
I mean, I already said Denis Villeneuve. If I took that away, I'm sorry. I have to say it. The Russo brothers, they've never made it. Like,
big Yumi and Dupree guy. Big Yumi
no,
and Dupree
their
guy.
comic book movies. I'm sorry. I love them. I would never put them in the official list, but if we're talking about runner-ups, that's close. And then the other one would be, I think, a weird choice for me, but Terrence Malick. I really like Terrence Malick, and I like a lot of his movies. Just the most recent stuff is wacky and out there. Like, I really like Knight of Cups, but I did not like Song to Song at all. See, there you go, and that's just to show about his work. But I would put Badlands as the movie. I think Badlands is his first film, and it's epic. And Days of Heaven, New World, all of his movies, Tree of Life, everything, love it.
Tree of Life is
Okay, so now we're going to give you your personal top 10 list, guys. Normally I grade each person's list, but there was a lot that I haven't seen at times, so we're going to skip that. But number 10 is Coppola. Number 9 is Barry Jenkins. Number 8 is Lars von
Trier.
7 is Scorsese. 6 is Villeneuve.
What a weird list.
5 is David Fincher. 4 is Wes Anderson. Number 3 is Quentin Tarantino. Number 2 is Nolan. And number 1 is Paul Thomas Anderson. So
interesting. That's a weird fucking list.
Wes Anderson above all those guys hurts.
That is a D- list at best. Congratulations, guys! You do complete the list of Your List Sucks. I appreciate everybody for being on tonight. This actually has sparked some other ones that will come out later. Actors, and I want to do composers. I think those will be interesting topics that will be up later on. Not really going to determine when, but those are. I like this concept of a show. So, again, thanks for being on, Paul Nazario. Brooke, I about called you Brooklyn. That's really insulting. Tim Brzakala.
Yikes.
We'll be back next week with Disney songs with Cain, Kaleb, and Brooklyn for Cain's last episode.
You mean Tim?
Shut your mouth. Okay. Have a great time, and see you next week.